I've woken up in Jesmond Dean under a bush in a car with no idea of how I got there at all, behind the wheel. I've been in some very violent, very controlling, very, very toxic relationships. Started using before work, and then I was drinking heavily every night after work. But that was just, well, everyone has a bottle of wine after work, don't they? Everyone does that. It's just sociable. It's just this. Until it wasn't. If I had a particularly long shift, I would use them in the toilet at work. My curiosity got deeper of different methods of using. And while I was in Bristol, I started using drugs in a way that I never thought I would. At that point in my early 40s in Bristol was when I realised that things were spiralling. And I had to get taken to hospital and put on machines and stuff. And I remember a doctor coming to the bottom of the bed and saying, you know that you need help. September the 18th, 2018 was my last drink at about 4 a.m. before I went to rehab.
I don't really know how to introduce it. Am I just saying this is kind of just your story? How would you want it? How would you like it introduced? Or are you not bothered?
I'm not bothered, really.
No?
Just kind of go along the lines of it being, a hidden addiction rather than a visible one.
Okay, yeah, I like that. That's probably what it gets titled then, hidden addictions. Right, let's begin. So this is a From the Outside Looking In podcast. Thank you for agreeing to come on, Meg.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to talk about your story, but also touching on the whole hidden addiction side of things. And that there's lots and lots of people out there that are struggling that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
Lots of professional people as well at the very highest levels are hiding all these addictions. So I guess I'll just hand it over to you and ask how it all affected you and when it started and, how bad it got, what it involved. I will quickly, before we start, I'll just say that from talking to you before, your story seems, mine wasn't as severe as yours, but mine's very similar in the fact that you couldn't really pin down one addiction to me. I wasn't addicted to anything per se. I was never physically addicted to anything, but I've never been, until recently, I've never been sober, and it was just a case of swapping one thing for the other, and everything was always in excess, and it was never, it was never recreational with me. It was always too much to the point where it was a problem, and it was just all the time.
Yeah.
So yours seemed pretty similar, but ended up in a far worse place. And other than that, I'll stop talking and hand it over to you, Meg.
Thanks, Ricky. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to speak today. It's life's got a weird way of turning out, because this was initially going to be something that was kind of squeezed into a busy day. And now this has become the highlight of my day. Because I've been isolating since Saturday. I've got COVID.
Right, okay.
So excuse me if I cough, it's...
No, that's fine.
I'm sitting here in my house, which is very old and very difficult to heat, hence the scarf. But I feel okay.
Yeah.
It's actually nice now to have this as the only thing today, to think about. It's kind of given me something to look forward to today. So thank you so much for
no worries. No, thank you.
Worked out well. Talking to you briefly before we did this, I think it's really important for me, talking to you as a fellow addict, alcoholic, or however you want to name yourself, is, we should never compare. And I think you saying mine was more severe, it might seem more severe to someone looking in, but your severe was bad enough for you, and your journey is your journey. And I think what I kind of want to convey today is, you know, you touched on it when you introduced me, is that hidden addiction. You know, many people watching this, many people we know, many people all around the world really are used to seeing what are known as, you know, visible addicts. Your podcast is concentrated on street homeless people, people who have, to society, in society's eyes, have really hit rock bottom. And that rock bottom looks like having no home, not having your children with you, injecting drugs, drinking out of a bag, you know, hiding away or begging on the streets. And yes, I agree that addiction and alcoholism is very much those things as well, you know. I worked in drug and alcohol services for 14 years before I came into recovery myself. And I worked with that visible population, you know, that population of people who were, you know, visible but invisible to society. People don't want to know, oh, they've caused it themselves, or, you know, they had choices, they had options, this is what they chose. They chose to be shoplifting, they chose crime, they chose homelessness. And, you know, it's a really difficult place for people to ask for help when they're like that, because lots of folk don't want to know. But I guess my side of things, because I didn't experience those things firsthand in my journey, I saw it every day at work. I worked with these people to support them. But my addiction, you know, kind of crept up, and it became so big in the end that it felt like it was absolutely impossible in the last few years for me to ask for any help, because I was classed as a professional, because I had my own house, because I had a car, you know, I had a car, had the job, had friends, never had my children taken away from me, you know, haven't got a criminal record to the extent that I've gone to prison through my drug use. But excuse me, I just think that it's really difficult to, you said that, you know, whereas you were never addicted to one thing, it was always something, and until recently you've never been sober. And, you know, working through my recovery since September 2018, just over 3 years ago, I've had the ability to look at every single, strip away every layer and drill down to every point where I've clearly always had that propensity to be an addict. The behaviours in childhood, the way that manifests itself, and there's always been something that took me out of this. So before I started using drugs, it would be, you know, fantasy and shoplifting, you know, friends, using people, using, you know, just anything to not be in my own head, from probably about 7-9 years old.
So it's that thing, innit? What came first, the addict or the addiction?
Yeah.
I mean, if you was to ask me, I don't know. But same thing. It's right from an early age with me. I took to taking drugs like a duck to water. Do you know what I mean? And it was in excess straight away, right from the get go. And it was hard drugs as well. You know, I was doing acid at 13 and things like that. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's you kind of go through a catalogue, I think, you know, a menu of various drugs that, you know, for many people don't ever become a problem. And, you know, the what would be classed as softer drugs like cannabis use and psychedelics as a teenager. And then, you know, being a weekend warrior and just going clubbing at the weekend or drinking at the weekend excessively and partying with friends and stuff. But it became quite apparent to me quite early on that I would be the person who just wouldn't stop. When people wanted to go home or wanted to go to bed, I'd be like, well, no, like, let's just carry on. Let's get more. It was always more. It doesn't matter what the drug is, you know, what suit it's wearing, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's legal stuff. It's always more. My addiction was just wanting more. And I had a lot of problematic things and events that happened, especially in my 30s, when I was doing my degree and when I went into work. There was blatant things that were massive warning signs that, you know, this is no longer manageable, it's no longer fun, and it's no longer serving you well. But it wasn't until I was 44 that I actually, you know, hit that absolute rock bottom and said, yeah, enough is enough, and finally asked for help. And I'm so grateful. So grateful that I had that rock bottom and that experience in my last year of using, that I just needed to take every hat off, my work hat, my mum hat, my grandmom hat, you know, my everything that I knew that I thought made Meg had to be put to one side, and I had to swallow my pride and say, listen, I need help, and I am an addict, and unless I get help, I'm going to die, either by killing myself or by accidentally dying through the substances I was using and the way I was using them. Very dangerous.
Yeah. What age were you when you started?
Well, if we're looking at alcohol,
yeah, I mean, I class alcohol as a drug. You know, it's all the same to me. I know that some people don't. It's all exactly the same.
Yeah. It's the same reason for wanting to escape. I was 12 the first time I drank, and I was on my own.
Yeah.
Oh, the window cleaners in the backyard. Oh dear, the storm has blown all sorts of stuff all over my window, so I'm really glad they're here today. Yeah, I was 12, and interestingly, the way that my addiction started in terms of substances was exactly how it ended. And I was 12 years old. It must have been around Christmas time, because we never had alcohol in the house. My mum would only drink kind of maybe once a year or special occasions and stuff. You know, I never had alcohol around me when I was growing up, but I can remember we had some alcohol in the house, and I remember spying it and going to snuck the bottle of Cointreau up into my bedroom when I was 12 years old, and drank a lot for a 12-year-old drinking Cointreau. And I remember feeling really, really out of control. I remember feeling really dizzy, and I remember kind of just sinking off into what I guess was sleep, just a really early blackout, you know. And for those moments, I was no longer being bullied at school, no longer having issues at home, no longer wondering why I didn't feel like I fitted in. You know, that alcohol at that point took all of those worries as that little person away, and that I thought was wonderful, you know. So that was my first experience. And then cannabis use, and you know, kind of messing around with people at school and just trying different things. But in terms of all my friends and the circles that I was moving in at school and stuff, people were kind of progressing to the early 90s rave scene, and all of the substance use that comes along with that, you know. And I became a mum at a very young age, so I kind of missed a huge chunk of that. And I went out when I could, and I danced when I could, and I had that amazing feeling of togetherness, of oneness in the early rave scene without taking drugs. And I didn't even drink alcohol then. Once I had my daughter, I didn't drink alcohol. I gave up smoking when I found out the day I was pregnant. She was the most important thing to me in my life, and that anything, if I could go out or could go and have fun with my friends, that was great, but I would not do it under the influence of anything. I was completely straight. And to this day, I am so blessed to have experienced that. Initially, I went on to take drugs in the rave scene, but that initial bit with just feeling the music and the friends and that, you know, we had that sense that there was something really special happening at that point in the UK and across the world. And I'm so lucky to have felt part of that. And that's allowed me in my recovery to go out now. I've been out this year for the first time properly, out.
Yeah.
On the rave in the summer in Bristol, and felt that again, and had the hairs on my arms standing up, and had that euphoria, and had that feeling of belonging with everyone, and just the music. It's just the music. That's so many.
I was out at a rave in Bristol myself a few weeks ago, drum and bass for the first time in a long time. I was the oldest there easily, but I didn't care. I didn't care, you know what I mean? I just thought, life's flying by so quickly, I don't want to miss out anymore. So
it's a beautiful thing, and it's a lot of the feelings that I used to have in clubs and on the dance floor, which I thought were drugs, I've realized that actually it's just the way you feel when you hear something that excites you, and that it's, you know, it's been amazing to bring that aspect of me back into my life, because I lost all that. I lost all that addiction.
So I mean that leads me to when what went wrong then. If you were doing that after you just had your daughter and you were enjoying it, or what happened to make it all go so drastically wrong?
I was curious.
Right.
I think like many people who start taking drugs, you know, we don't wake up one day and go, I think I'll be an addict. I think I'll nearly ruin my life. I think I'll ruin my health. I think I'll lose the faith and trust of all my friends and family. You know, it started out of curiosity, and it started off being with people who were saying, Meg, why don't you A, why don't you B, why, you know, and I gave in, and I found ecstasy very appealing, and that went on from 19. I had my son as well at 18 years old, and kind of felt the same way as I did when I'd had my daughter. You know, he was the most important. These two little people were most important, and I didn't want to use drugs ever around them or drink around them, and didn't. But yeah, when he was about a year old, I think he was staying with his dad, and I went clubbing and tried ecstasy, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and that I carried on using that in one form or another until the end. Yeah,
ecstasy's come up a few times on the podcast that I've done, and we've always said, like, we have to have grown-up conversations about drugs, and there's no point in pretending that people take drugs because they're not fun. Do you know what I mean? Which, you know, when people first take drugs, you do it because they make you feel good, and ecstasy is the same one for me. I had a great time in places. Do you know what I mean? Eventually, it all became too much, which is what we're talking about. Eventually, just that natural sort of thing within me where I have to do everything to excess meant that it stopped being fun, and, you know, it wasn't recreational. But there's no point in pretending that drugs make you feel horrible, because they don't. And it was the same with me. The first time I took an ecstasy pill, I was just like, this is amazing. Like, these make you feel amazing. And then when you're at a rave and everybody around you is the same, you know, and you're high-fiving strangers and you've got the music and everything, it's easy to get carried away.
Yeah, it is. I think the common thread throughout pretty much, certainly my experience and many people I've spoken to, is the thing that we're looking for when we use is connection. And it doesn't matter what we use, why we're using it. If you explore the reasons why most humans want that escape and want that, they just want a connection. And the opposite of addiction is connection. And now I've realized that I can make healthy connections, and both with myself and with the people around me, and with what I sense to be, a power greater than me working at force in the universe, which is quite evident, that happens because of what we're going through in the world at the minute. There's always much more stronger things than me and my pathetic addiction. But initially it's just about connection, and that became so important to me, to find that connection. And that connection in the end became only drugs.
Yeah.
I had no connection with others. I didn't want to engage with life. I just wanted me looking for my way out, and me looking for my comfort, my solace was found in a bag, in a bottle,
So I could never understand, why people were sober. It made no sense to me. I'd be like, well, what do you do? Like, what else is it? What, so you don't, even if I went out and did all the other stuff that I needed to do on a night time, I just didn't understand why everybody would then not just get smashed in some shape or form before they went to sleep. Like, do people not just drink themselves to sleep every night? How else do you go to sleep? Do you know what I mean? Or do you not just take something to stop feeling normal? Like, what, you just feel normal the whole time? That's weird. But now I'm realizing it isn't weird. It's actually weird to not be like that. And over the last 10 months today, I've been sober. I've only just realized that. But yeah, like all of a sudden, I'm actually enjoying it. I'm like what you said, it's that reconnection with life. And I'm like, this is what normal people do. They don't get smashed all the time, and they enjoy life just for life's sake. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just enjoy being alive, and actually, the blessing that it is, kind of thing. So yeah, like, obviously you started taking the pills and that, progressing, it's getting worse. When did it, roughly what age and stuff, did you realize everything was just spiraling out of control, to the point where, for me, I just realized, like, even if I wasn't drinking, especially because obviously I joined the Navy at 32, so that's when everything else stopped, and it was just drinking because of the rules of the environment I'm in. But all of a sudden I realized that I was just, even when I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about drinking all the time. I'd wake up and my first thought, even if it was to tell myself not to drink that day, it was just all consuming, that all my thoughts were alcohol and not being sober. So is that what happened with you?
Looking back with the blessing of hindsight, looking back, I know now where those most obvious points were, where the wheels were coming off a bit, and that was definitely in my 30s, and there's lots of stuff that happened around my very early 30s that I still live with a lot of remorse now, and regret. And looking back at that time, it was blatantly obvious that it was directly due to my behaviors under the influence. And it was, I've lost friendships, quite what I consider to be close friendships at the time, and really screwed with people's lives. And just kind of had this hedonistic attitude that fuck everything, nobody's feelings matter. I'm not going to apply myself at, I just finished my degree, very ambivalent about what I was doing, not being fully present for my children, and waking up in some very, very, very sticky, dangerous situations, and not only putting my own life at risk, but putting the members of the public's life at risk because of how I was conducting myself. I've woken up in Jasmine Dean under a bush in a car with no idea of how I got there at all, behind the wheel. And I woke up in the morning in a blackout behind the wheel with the car ploughed into a tree. Now, to any normal person, that might be a warning sign, like, oh, maybe you are drinking too much, maybe you are using too much. But I just thought, nah, it's just a one-off. Thank God no one was hurt. Thank God the car's pretty much all right. Let's just get on with it, you know. And there was all these warning signs throughout my 30s that would be the point where any person who was able to manage, you know, using substances successfully would have maybe had put the brakes on a wee bit, excuse the pun. But because I was an addict, I didn't know that I had this problem, this issue. I just thought that I could manage it myself and control it myself. And in my kind of early 40s, I was very, very unhappy. I'd come out of another broken relationship, and I know now that using relationships is part of my addiction, and you know, trying to solve my problems by having the validation of another person and having to be in a relationship, and usually going for people who were absolutely no good for me. And that's been a thread throughout my adult life throughout. And I've been in some very violent, very controlling, very, very toxic relationships. But you know, that today is not the time to talk through that. But it's I'd come out of another relationship, and I'd moved from Newcastle shortly before my 40th, and I'd moved away to a city which I'd fallen in love with, and that city was Bristol. And I know, again, from talking to you, Ricky, that we have stuff in common, because you've been there and you've lived over in South Shields where I lived as well. And so
yeah, I'll say this, out of those two places, I only love one of them. It's not South Shields. even though I grew up in South Shields, and I'm technically, if I'm from anywhere other than down south where I was born, it's South Shields. But I love Bristol. I think Bristol's a cool place. But at the same time, Bristol is a very hedonistic city, and if you're prone to certain behaviours, Bristol can be a pretty dangerous place, because, as you well know, and as I spoke about in a previous podcast I haven't released yet, you can get anything you want in Bristol within 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's a wonderful city, and it's a very creative city, and the music there, you know, I fell in love with the fact that everything that we wanted to have here in Newcastle was done there every week. And this is on a creative basis, not on a drugs basis, but hand in hand with that came a lot of drug use.
Yeah.
I went for a job interview there, got the job, moved down there, packed this house up in Newcastle, shoved all my belongings into a little car, and drove down and started a new life. And for a time I was really, really happy there, and I absolutely loved my job. I was working prescribing down there for heroin users. I was working with alcohol users, crack users, very large client base of people who really, really, really needed a lot of support. And I absolutely loved that job. But there comes a time where you can only give so much of yourself, and you've not got a great, you know, life going on back at home, that you either burn out, or I thought that the answer was to start using, whilst, you know, I just never wanted to be seen to be failing. Failure to me was a massive issue, and being the person I am, and one of my huge defects is perfectionism, and wanting to be perfect and wanting to be great at doing everything that I do. So in order to, what I thought then was help more people, was just to carry on working really, really long hours and never give myself a break, because then, you know, that would mean that I was doing everything for everyone. And I just started burning out. So my answer was just start using before work. And like you say, anything is available at any time there. So I'd started using before work. And then I was drinking heavily every night after work, but that was just, well, everyone has a bottle of wine after work, don't they? Everyone does that. It's just sociable. It's just this, until it wasn't. And then the drugs would start, I'd start taking them to work with me. If I had a particularly long shift, I would use them in the toilet at work. I would cycle to work 8 miles every day through Bristol, through the Bristol traffic, you know, on high on drugs. And it was there in Bristol where I had, you know, I've always had a lot of drug users around me, both friends and all the people I was supporting. And my curiosity got deeper of different methods of using. And while I was in Bristol, I started using drugs in a way that I never thought I would. It was always something that I knew was really, really dangerous. And it's always something that I knew that other people did. The levels that because I had all those huge warning signs in my 30s, but when you're so far in denial, you're like, if I don't do it that way, it doesn't mean I'm not an addict, you know, or I'm not an addict because I don't do this, or I'm not an addict. So I just thought, the people I support at work, they're addicts, you know, they are very clearly injecting drugs, you know, lost everything. And I just thought, you know, I had so much around me that I never thought to look, well, Meg, you're just exactly the same. And, you know, I started using drugs in a really unsafe way, and on my own. And at that point, I knew that, to answer your question in a very roundabout way, Ricky, was, you know, that point in my early 40s in Bristol was when I realized that things were spiraling. And my answer was to leave Bristol and come back home to Newcastle. And again, nothing's fixed if you don't fix this first. So I brought my even deeper drug problem and all the shit that came with that back up here to Newcastle and tried to start my life yet again with a new job, new people around me. And the way I was using was very difficult to do publicly because it's not publicly acceptable, put it that way. Those people who know me, who may be watching this, know what I did. I don't think this is the time to explain on your podcast, but most people who know me and know my story knows what I was doing. That's when I started realizing that this is no longer recreational, it's no longer sociable, it's no longer me connecting with other people. It is literally just me, my drugs and my alcohol. And from coming back here in 2016 to going into treatment, things were really, really, really bad. That rock bottom, I think, lasted about 2 years.
What was the event? Was there an event, or was it just an accumulation of just being at rock bottom for so long that made you think, you know, I've got to get some serious help here? You know, was there one moment where you just thought, right, this is it, it's got to stop?
Yeah, that there was a moment, most definitely. And although it makes me kind of shiver to think about the moment, it was the moment that changed my entire life. And that was it was my mum's birthday in July 2018, and I'd been out for a meal with my mum and my daughter in a little vegan place, and I went outside for a vape and didn't go back into the room. Just left my mum and my daughter wondering where the fuck has she gone. You know, I just literally walked from Sandyford to the Tyne Bridge. And, you know, this wasn't just out of the blue. This was the second attempt at taking my own life that year.
Right.
But that the first time was in the April, and I had the police knock down the back door, and I had friends coming round trying to break in because they knew what was going on. I had mental health services here through the night, but I never thought, that this was a time where I needed to ask for help. I just kind of, as soon as the police and the ambulance staff left, I just opened a bottle of gin and started drinking. They told me that I wasn't allowed to drink while they were near me, but the minute they left, I opened another bottle. But this time in July, just 3 months after that, I was prevented from jumping off the Tyne Bridge by some members of the public, which I'm smiling because they were, it was a bunch of little chavs on the rented mobikes, the little like the scooters have, but they had you can nick them. I think that's why they've stopped doing them now, but you could nick them. And there was just these hoodies, these proper little chavs that you would give a wide berth if you saw them in the street.
Yeah.
But they clocked me and they surrounded me with their nicked bikes. And I can't remember exactly what they said, but every time I tried to step forward, they would move their bikes tighter and tighter around me. And they shouted for help for an adult. I think they realized that as a bunch of teenagers, they couldn't do much without hurting me. So they shouted for a member of the public, and she phoned the police, and the police took me away. I can't remember anything about being in the police station here in Forth Banks, but I do remember the police taking me back to my mum's house, and she was there with my daughter and came to answer the door, and the look on my daughter's face, not just my mum, I can't remember her face, but I remember her words. But I remember seeing my daughter's face, who was, nearly 30 years old at the time, and just thinking, I can't do this any longer to the people that I love. I am hurting them. I didn't really think about me at the time. I was just thinking about starting to realize the impact that it was having. There was a whole raft of shit that happened before that. My daughter had left to go to another country. She'd left to go to Australia. I spent the entire time leading up to that leaving do completely smashed, turned up completely smashed, and then couldn't wait to leave completely smashed. I just didn't want to be around people, and I hadn't shown up for my kids or my granddaughter for a long, long time. And all of those moments kind of just came together in that one little split second of seeing her face. And the next day I was brought home, used again as soon as I got home. I woke up in a mess of shite on my bed, not literally, but just crap everywhere. And just thought, right, I'm going to pick up the phone. And I picked up the phone and asked for help. And that was the moment where, I have to get honest, because telling everyone that I'm okay, people are starting to notice I'm not okay. Yeah. I didn't show up for Sut's wedding. He's sat next to you now.
Yes.
I didn't, I had an invite to.
I forgive you.
Thank you. Just like every addict, I know we have really good intentions of showing up and doing the thing, but when it comes to doing the thing, I'm just too scared. You're so terrified of everyone in the world, and you just feel like everyone knows what a shitbag you are.
What year was the bridge incident? Do you know?
2018, July
2018. So in 2018, some little chavs that everybody gives a bad rep to stopped you jumping off a bridge. Yeah. So just want to get that out there in case we can find out who they are. Yeah. In case they're out there.
Yeah, who they are or who they were, but I believe they were angels. I absolutely believe they're angels, because these are people that you would normally avoid.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, that ties in with the fact that, everybody, the young get demonized, and they probably were a bit naughty because they're around on nicked bikes, but it shows that actually there's still a massive part of them that are good. So you never know. It's a long shot, but they might watch this and be like, that was us.
That would be amazing. I am, whoever you are out there, I am eternally grateful because you stopped me flinging myself off the Tyne Bridge that night. And yeah, if it wasn't for those guys on the bikes, I don't think I'd be sitting talking to you now, you know?
Yeah. So then you ring for help. What's the process? Because I've never done a rehab or anything. I've got friends that have. You know, I just sort of I do the meetings. I do certain things to help me out, but I've managed to sort of realize that I'm an addict before getting to. It's like what you were saying. You know, you tell yourself, well, I'm not an addict because I haven't had to go to rehab. But there was a part of me that thought probably best to just not. People in rehab were addicts before they got to rehab, weren't they?
Yeah.
For years. So yeah. But what happened to you? Is that the route you went down, the rehab route and whatnot?
It is the rehab route is the way that I found recovery. I was aware of services available just simply because of my job here.
Yeah.
Had I lived, when I first came back to the Northeast, actually, I moved to North Tyneside. Had I just lived a couple of miles that way in Wallsend, I would not have gone to rehab because it's a postcode thing.
Right.
But when I came back to this house, I'd been renting this place out. And when I came back here, you become entitled in Newcastle, have a pot of money that are for adult social care. And because I was referring my clients, the patients, whatever you'd like to call them, the people I was supporting to get well, I knew that there was a pot of money and I knew that there was rehab if you are referred to social services. And then there's an assessment process and it's huge. There are other ways in. I know there are other ways in. There's private. You can go to a 12-step non-residential rehab, which is based over in Gateshead, just over the river. But I knew that I needed to go away and I knew that I needed to be away from my environment, away from everything that reminded me of who I was and who I was trying to get away from. And then to be honest, Ricky, I don't know exactly what I wanted when I picked up the phone. I just knew that I had to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
I just knew that I had to ask for help. Now, the rehab that I went to was a 12-step rehab. And I had experience of 12-step programs because of work. When I'd lived in Bristol, I was taken to an open meeting by one of my colleagues who was in the fellowship himself. And I remember being in that meeting and seeing everyone drinking fucking tea and hugging and shaking hands and reading and talking and thinking, you guys are full of shit. You're shit. You must be going home and using something. Like, there's no way that you guys are this happy and this switched on and this comfortable with yourselves and around other people without using some kind of crutch. I believed that all these people were full of shit.
Yeah.
I did not believe that the power of talking to another person and the power of one addict helping another could actually get you well and keep you well.
Yeah.
I'd worked in a medical model for so long about fixing people with prescriptions, fixing people with face-to-face counselling, fixing people, sending them away, sending them to work, sending them, giving them meaningful activities. These are all important parts of what makes a person, recover. But the answer isn't in a prescription. The answer isn't in another drug. The answer was for me that I found was just getting honest and talking to other addicts and living a program one day at a time. But I had so much preconceived bullshit perceptions about 12-step recovery. I heard the God word. I fucking hated that because the last thing that I am is religious.
Yeah.
I hate everything that religion, as organized religion, stands for, and I find it very divisive. And I hadn't realized that program was written when people's opinion of God was wildly different from the program that we know today, and I still don't believe in a God. I don't believe in a deity in the sky or wherever. I believe in the universe and a power greater than myself. And like I said, that could be the wind, the storms, love. But the rehab route is, I got a place. I was assessed, I think, in August after picking up the phone in July. The day before my appointment, before my assessment, I overdosed really badly and had to be blue lighted to hospital. My partner, thank God, my partner was here with me. I'd met him in the madness, and he was very open to using the way that I was using, and I kind of dragged him down to that level within hours of meeting him. And the pair of us, he was a drug dealer, so he was getting very good drugs at source without them being cut, and they were very, very pure. And we spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. And if you keep using drugs that strong for that long that way, then you're going to overdose. And I had a seizure. And I had to get taken to hospital and put on machines and stuff. And I remember a doctor coming to the bottom of the bed and saying, you know that you need help. And I was really dismissive, and he was pulling up my arms and stuff and hiding things. And yeah, just being all cocky and full of ego. He went, no, you need help. Have you got help? And I said, I've actually got an appointment tomorrow. And he said, will you make sure that you go? So I went to my appointment about 4 hours after getting out of hospital and got assessed. And because of the amount that I was using and the way I was using and the suicide attempts and the overdose now as well, that I got pretty much fast-tracked into place. And I went up to visit in Scotland in the late August and started there September the 18th. So September the 18th, 2018 was my last drink at about 4 a.m. before I went to rehab. And I'm smiling, it's not funny. I nearly didn't go. It's like, fuck this, I'm not going.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this drink. I'm enjoying this drink. I'm not an addict.
Yeah, I'm all right. I was saying to my partner, oh, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll manage. We'll just stop buying. We'll stop. And he was going, no, Meg, you're going. You're going. But I'd stopped using cocaine for 4 weeks when I was in my early 40s. And I detoxed myself for 4 weeks. So I was completely convinced that I didn't have an issue, but I detoxed myself by using ketamine. So in this addict's head, I was well because I wasn't using what was then my drug of choice. But I detoxed using ketamine every day, all day, and and MDMA as well, straight in, both of them. And but that was my way. Well, I'm okay. I don't need any help because I have control of this. I had no control whatsoever. No.
And so with the whole hidden thing, when you got to rehab, we'll keep everything anonymous. Obviously, that's the nature of the beast. But when you got to rehab, there was lots of other professional people that were also hiding things, and sort of taps into the thing that we probably deal with a lot of people every day in very professional roles that have got issues. I don't know, but I've done one recently about the war on drugs. And that's why I just think the whole thing's just ridiculous, because the war on drugs is to target the war that you can see, which really means the war on drugs only really ends up affecting poor people the worst, because we're the ones, I say we, because I was poor when I was growing up, not poor anymore. I'm not rich, I'm not poor. Just got a house, middle class nearly. But no, it's skewed because the war on drugs is just not helping anybody, and again, it misses out this whole section of society that are struggling. Yeah. Like yourself, I mean, you worked all the way through this. It's not like you were out on the street where we could all see you doing it. But yeah, you've told me before that you met people in your rehab that you wouldn't have thought that they'd be in there. But did that help you?
Yeah, it did help. I was in there with police, with diplomats, a mayor, lots of people from what I would consider to be quite high standing and quite very responsible members of society who the average Joe in the street would not expect to be a problematic addict. And they were, again, part of this kind of hidden population that I can't say anything. I can't possibly tell anyone how bad things are getting because I'm going to lose X, Y, and Z. And it's only when we realize that you're going to lose X, Y, and Z anyway because you're going to die that you have to put all that shit that you think that makes you and you think that you fit into society, and seeing those people having to kind of put that ego to one side and to accept that drugs and alcohol don't choose, you know, regardless of class or status or money or no money or job or no job, it doesn't discriminate, you know.
No.
If you have that inside of you that you feel that you need to use anything to change the way you see, the way you feel or the way you see the world, then, you know, that could be any person in the street. And it was really an eye-opener for me. And it's when I came out of treatment and I came out and I started going to meetings and I just tried to replicate what I'd learned in rehab for 6 months. I tried to replicate that out here as much as I could just to keep myself right. And I saw colleagues who I'd worked with and I was like, shit, like, of course she wasn't going to say anything at the time. You know, we get support for our addiction and people who know us know and people who don't know us don't need to know. But there was this whole range of folk who I never thought I'd see in that room.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, it was all the people that I support. I would see all the people, all those clients, they would point the finger at me and go, well, Meg, how can you tell us how to get well when you're at home doing even more? So it was a real eye-opener, and it was so humbling to see that, you know, anyone can fall into this. Anyone who's struggling with anything, there's help out there, as long as you just be prepared that, you know, we're all exactly the same. I was so worried about losing faith, if you like, and losing my livelihood, which I've left that livelihood behind anyway. Now I've chosen to go a completely different direction because I feel I don't want to work in that field at the moment. But yeah, seeing all those people and seeing them, hearing their stories, you know, and going, Jesus, like, it's just the same. It's just the same. And just because we have loving families or, you know, good jobs or smart clothes or whatever, and it's still as painful and it's still as serious, and strip all that bullshit away, like we're all the same underneath. We're just little kids who want a hug. Yeah, just want that connection.
So where are you at now then with your sobriety and your recovery and everything? Is it all going well?
It is. It all. Put my teeth back in. It's going really well, but I don't look at it as like whether it's going well or not. It's just going.
Yeah.
I know that today I am probably going to get my head on the pillow tonight, having not drank any alcohol and having not taken any drugs. That is enough. And then
are you? I suppose the thing. Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with the fact that you can't ever take drugs again?
Yes.
Ever. Do you know what I mean? Ever.
Yeah.
Which is the first few times that I tried to start. I was somewhere the other day and someone summed it up perfectly when they said that, you know, there were times that they'd stopped before, but really what they were asking themselves is, I wonder how long I can last before I drink again, or I wonder how long I'll last this time before I like use again. So it was always there that they would just it was temporary. Whereas now the same person is in the same place as me. I'm comfortable with the fact that I can't ever drink again, and I don't want to because it was crap.
Yeah.
So is that where you're at? Really, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, there was times where I would do the odd sober day, or I would try and give up for January, or I would go for a full week without using to the weekend. But you're right that you're just waiting for the next time you use.
Yeah.
And life's not like that today. I don't go from day to day. Don't get me wrong. Like, my friends will say, people have said to me, well, Meg, it's been over 3 years now. Don't you just think that you should stop counting? Or don't you think you'll be all right doing this, or being around this person, or doing that? And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. I was using, but things were getting a bit serious, and I was using or drinking for the best part of 26 years. Now that doesn't go away overnight, and this, I only, as it says in the program, we only get a daily reprieve. So if I start thinking, oh, poor Meg, I'm not going to be able to use ever again, or I'm never going to be able to have a nice glass of wine with a meal, or it's Christmas soon, maybe just one.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. If I start thinking what I haven't got, it becomes a poor me sitting on my pity pot again. I need to think about what I have got, and what the brilliant stuff that has come into my life since being in recovery, and the stuff that I want back in my life is also in the post if I keep staying, sensible and sober and clean one day at a time. But all I need to do, Ricky, is fast forward 24 hours. So if I did get something, you don't have to leave the house. I'm obviously isolating.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave the house to get anything nowadays. So if I was to do that, no one would know. My kids wouldn't know. My partner wouldn't know. He's gone back to work yesterday. He hasn't got COVID for some strange reason. And it would only be me who knows that that's happened. But then I have just lost 3 and a bit years of recovery. I would have to phone my sponsor and tell her what's happened. And I would fast forward to waking up in a fucking world of pain, with all sorts around me, probably sick. It's just, if I ever start thinking that it's a good idea again, I just fast forward 24 hours and go, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
You lose trust and patience, and I have to have faith every day that I don't need to use. I've proved to myself that I can't use safely or sensibly like other people that I know.
Yeah.
It's just not, it hasn't been on the table for a long time like that, and it probably never will be. So, but I don't ever think about what I can never do again, because I can do loads.